Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and it's that time of the week again where we round up the results from all the major tournaments, and there was a lot going on this past weekend. Grand Prix Providence and Los Angeles, those are both standard events. Star City Games Dallas Open was a team trio, so we get to look at Standard, Modern, and Legacy. Not to mention, they also did classic tournaments for all three of those formats. So a lot to talk about today. I want to get right into it. Quickly, though, before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here at the channel. Our Patreon page is linked down there. You're going to find links to products on Amazon. And actually, no matter what you buy from Amazon, once you go through that link, we'll get a small percentage for the channel. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering the promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save some cash while you support us. As always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. Y'all make the channel what it is. So thank you. Let's get into it. All right, let's begin with the big Grand Prix. Grand Prix Providence. Huge standard event. Let's look at the top 8. First place, Mono Red Flame of Keld. This also came in 7th and 8th. And there's only small differences between some of these Mono Red variants, and we're going to look at them today. Some are considered Mono Red Flame of Keld, some are considered Wizards, some are considered just the classic aggro. We'll talk about those differences. Second place, Blue White Control, which also came in 3rd place. 4th place was Blue Black Control. 5th place was Blue Black Mid-Range. 6th place, Red Black Aggro. So even though we see a lot of Mono Red here and a couple control decks and some variants of control, I mean, there's at least still some good diversity here, and you're going to notice that especially as we look at some of the other tournaments too. So let's look at some of the key decks here. First place was Mono Red Flame of Keld. And this particular version of the Mono Red deck is going to run 4 Viashino Pyromancers. We'll look at that card in just a second. 3 copies of Flame of Keld. So if Flame of Keld's there, a lot of people will consider it a Flame of Keld deck. If that was missing, they would probably call this a Wizard deck because of the extra Wizards with Viashino as well as the Wizards Lightnings that are in here. Pretty much all the red aggro decks, though, are now running Wizards Lightnings because they have enough Wizards, even if they don't run the Pyromancer, for it to work out. So the deck did really well this weekend. We definitely saw that not only in this event, but in some of the others. Like I mentioned, Viashino Pyromancer is the card from Magic 2019 that's playing a big role, and as we go through the video today, we're going to talk about more cards from that set that are definitely contributing to these formats. Blue White Control coming in 2nd place. Now, I've noticed that you're seeing more and more Torrential Gearhulks in these control decks recently. Still got your 4 Teferis. I mean, that can still work as a win condition for you, but the Torrential Gearhulks give you another option as well. Some decks are running even more than just the 2, and you're going to see that in some variants as we move forward here. I think part of that is because without the vehicles decks as abundant as they used to be, you don't see as many Abrades and things like that necessarily being run. And that's going to open the door a little bit for Gearhulk to maybe make a little bit of a comeback at the end of this meta, and I think that's what we're starting to see here. You will notice, though, this particular build isn't running any cards from Magic 2019. 4th place, the Blue-Black variant of this control deck. Of course, now you take out your Teferis, you go with 4 Gearhulks, you also have the Scarab God in there, which is good tech. And then, of course, you lose a lot of your white control spells for black control spells like Vraska's Contempt. One thing I thought was cool, though, Infernal Reckoning out of the sideboard, and there's a few more decks that are doing that as well, you'll notice as we move forward. Black-Blue Mid-Range. This came in 5th place, and this is your more classic mid-range deck that we're used to seeing. It's got 3 copies of the Scarab God, you got your Champion of Wits in there, 2 Torrential Gearhulks, so nothing too surprising here, and there are no Magic 2019 cards contributing to the deck. Red-Black Aggro, another classic deck you're probably overly familiar with at this point, with your Chain Whirlers and your Glorybringer and all of that. Again, you're not going to find any cards here from Magic 2019. This is a very classic deck that's been around for a while now. All right, let's move on to the Grand Prix in Los Angeles. So here's what I was talking about. You do see some familiar faces here, but also some other new decks that we didn't see in the last tournament. 1st place, as well as 6th place, Red-Black Aggro. 2nd place, Blue-Black Midrange. 3rd place, Blue-White Gift. 4th place, Bat Nexus Turbo Fog. 5th place, Blue-White Approach. 7th place, Green-Black Constrictor. 8th place, Grixis Midrange. So a lot of variety in this one. Let's look at that Blue-White Gift deck that came in 3rd place. This is another deck that isn't running any Magic 2019 cards, and another deck you're probably pretty familiar with. The gift decks have kind of gone back to their roots now that we're at the end of the meta, and you see a lot of the blue-white variety doing well. 4th place, Bant Nexus, and yep, Turbofog looks pretty good, still putting up some good results. We'll have to see if that can maintain and what's going to happen post-rotation with some of these key cards. Now, much like some of the other versions that have been successful recently, you're only seeing one card and you're also seeing one Nissa. That seems to be a trend that a lot of people are following now. 4 Teferis, of course, they're your win condition. But other than that, you're probably familiar with this deck at this point. 4 copies of Nexus of Fate, in this version, 3 copies of Root Snare. Also out of the sideboard, a copy of Cleansing Nova. 5th place, Blue-White Approach. And I'll address the elephant in the room. I realize the person running this deck isn't a lot of people's favorite player right now due to things that have happened. But we're here to talk about the deck, so let's talk about it. Blue-White Approach basically is a nice option if you want to do something different other than just regular Blue-White control. If you don't want to rely heavily on Teferi and maybe a Gearhulk or 2 as your win condition, instead you throw in a couple copies of Approach of the Second Sun, and that's also a win condition for you. Other than that, the deck is going to look pretty similar to just the regular control decks that we see out there, but it is a different spin on it for sure. 7th place, Green-Black Constrictor. This is a deck that had a nice little comeback over the last couple weeks, partially due to some new Magic 2019 cards. And those were Vivian Reed. You see one of those in the main. Thorn Lieutenant has been great for green just generally in the format. Green really could use a powerful 2-drop, and this is definitely it. And then out of the sideboard, another copy of Vivian Reed, and you also find Vinemare here. 8th place, Grixis Midrange, very similar to the Dimir midrange deck we looked at a few moments ago. However, there's some big differences here, some glaring differences, especially if you look at some of the Magic 2019 contributions. Nicol Bolas, 3 copies in this particular build, very, very powerful card, and 1 copy of Izareth the Awakener. I thought that was actually pretty cool. I have not seen that before in these builds, and it seemed like it could be pretty decent. It's just a one of, and we'll kind of see if it sticks and other people follow this example in the future, but I thought it was pretty neat. Out of the sideboard, Infernal Reckoning showing up again. You ready for some more standard? Let's look at the Star City Games Team Open event. Here's the standard decks that top 8'd. Now, this Team Trios event, you have 1 player running a standard deck, 1 a legacy deck, and 1 a modern deck. It's very possible that one of the 3 decks could be propped up by the other 2 if they are performing a little weaker. So just keep that in mind when we look at some of these results. But coming in first place, Bant Nexus, Turbofog again. 2nd place, as well as 6th place, was Black Blue Midrange. 3rd, 4th, and 5th, Mono Red Aggro. 7th place, Grixis Midrange. 8th place, Esper Control. 3rd place, Mono Red Aggro. Now this one is not running Flame of Keld, but it is running 4 Wizard's Lightnings, no Viashino Pyromancer. So typically, folks will refer to this as Mono Red Aggro, even though, yes, it's very similar to the build we saw a moment ago and the build we're going to see coming up. 8th place, Esper Control. We haven't looked at one of these yet. 3 Teferis, and you notice if you look at the deck list as a whole, it looks very similar to many of the control builds. This time, though, 4 Torrential Gearhulks. So this one is leaning a little heavier on that card. And out of the sideboard, a couple Magic 2019 cards, Chromium the Mutable, as well as Infernal Reckoning. All right, there's another standard tournament. This is the Classic Tournament. So this time, first place went to Mono Green Aggro. Good to see that deck. Actually, this has been performing well in these Classic events recently. 2nd place, Mono Red Wizards. We'll look at that one in a second. 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 8th, Red Black Aggro. 5th place, Blue White Drakehaven, another variant on control we'll look at. And 7th place, Mono Blue Paradoxical Outcome, also known as the Mono Blue Artifact deck. First place was Mono Green Aggro. So it's always good to see these. This is a deck that I personally like a lot, and it's cool to see it perform well. You're probably pretty familiar with it at this point. This particular version running 3 Heart of Kirans. But for Magic 2019, there's Thorn Lieutenant again. Very key card, great 2-drop here. Out of the sideboard, Vivian Reed and Vinemare. 2nd place, Mono Red Wizards. Okay, this time you do have the Viashino Pyromancers, no Flame of Keld, and 4 Wizard's Lightning. So you don't need necessarily the Pyromancers, like I said, to make the Wizard's Lightnings effective, but they do help, I think, and it's not a bad card in its own right. So again, not very different, just a slight twist on what we've been seeing. 4 copies of Viashino Pyromancer come to us from Magic 2019 here again. Blue-White Drakehaven. Okay, so again, very similar to many of the control builds. We're seeing 3 Teferis here. No Torrential Gearhulks this time around, in the main anyway, a couple in the sideboard. However, this time we get Drakehaven as another way to perhaps win the game. This card in conjunction with Cycling Spells is the plan of attack here. Basically, this is a variation of the Cycling deck, which saw play a number of months ago. Mono Blue Paradoxical Outcome, which came in 7th place. I like this deck a lot. There's a lot of fans of the deck. It hasn't put up huge results, but this is a pretty decent result. This definitely gives hope to people that have bought into this deck and are excited about it. And it is playing a lot of cards from Magic 2019 compared to some of the others. Out of the main, 4 copies of Master Thopterist. Fantastic card here. Fountain of Renewal even shows up in the main. Out of the sideboard, you find Exclusion Mage. Alright, let's talk some Modern now. And we're going to look at the Modern Team Trios result from the Open first. Alright, so we have Humans coming in 1st, 2nd, and 5th. Very powerful deck. And remember, sometimes in these team events, people don't want to take risks. We know Humans is a good deck, so you see a lot of Humans here. 3rd place, Black-Red Vegevine. That Vegevine deck continues to be really strong. 4th place, as well as 6th place, is Storm. 7th place, Mono Green Tron. 8th place, Black-Red Hollow One. Let's look at a couple decks that were actually running some cards from Magic 2019 this weekend. The Humans deck that came in 1st place, and you see this in a lot of Humans decks nowadays. Militia Bugler, 3 copies, and this is pretty consistent now in a lot of these builds. Black-Red Vegevine, which came in 3rd place. We know that this really surprised a lot of people at the Pro Tour, and this deck got really hot. It can be blistering fast at times. And it does have a card from Magic 2019. It's Stitcher's Supplier. 4 copies in this particular build. That brings us to the Modern Classic, and we have some different decks here. As a matter of fact, a lot of different decks. Storm came in 1st. Mono Green Tron came in 2nd. Ironworks Combo came in 3rd. Blue-Red Wizards 4th. Black-Red Vegevine 5th. Living End 6th. Eldrazi Tron 7th. And Jund 8th. Wow. Huge variety. Just goes to show you how healthy Modern is right now as a format. Let's look at the Ironworks combo deck. This looks very similar, if not exactly the same, to the deck that Ben Stark was playing in the Pro Tour a couple weeks ago. And you'll notice there are 3 copies of Master Thopterist in the sideboard. 4th place was Blue-Red Wizards, another deck that's been very popular recently. In fact, Nimble Obstructionist has gone up a little bit in recent weeks due to this deck and the play it sees here. But this is another deck that does have a card from Magic 2019. Out of the sideboard, you'll find Alpine Moon. Let's move on to some Legacy, and this is the decks that were run in the team event. 1st place, Blue Black Death Shadow. That also came in 6th place. That looked great at the Pro Tour, so I'm sure a lot of people are playing that right now. 2nd, 3rd, as well as 5th and 7th was Grixis Delver. A lot of Grixis Delver. 4th place was Sneak and Show. And 8th place was Infect. Nothing new here. The decks were pretty similar to the ones we've seen in the past. Nothing from Magic 2019 really to speak of. And then, in the Classic, we did get a card from Magic 2019, but let's look at the top 8. Lands came in 1st place. Lands is a very powerful deck, but also very expensive. 2nd place, Grixis Control. 3rd place, Omnitel. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, Death and Taxes. 8th place, Affinity. And I gotta ask myself, especially in these Classic events, is Death and Taxes really that good, or is it just the cheapest deck to buy and what probably most players are playing at these type of events? Lands is probably a better deck, but a lot less people are going to be able to play that. So I think it's interesting when you look at Legacy, because I do think that, and it's true of Vintage too in some ways, depending on what kind of resources you have financially, you might not be able to buy into the best decks. So sometimes the best decks don't put up the best results all the time. So it's kind of interesting, food for thought. But let's look at the Death and Taxes deck that came in 5th place real quick. I just want to point this out. Brightling is showing up, usually a 1 or 2 of in most of these builds now. It does seem to be catching on. We'll have to see if it lasts in the long term. But there is a card from Magic 2019 here as a 1 of, and I've seen this in some other decks too. One of the other decks in the top 8 was also running one of these, but it's Remorseful Cleric. And it's actually kind of sweet. It definitely can help you with some graveyard shenanigans here and there, and it's a little flyer on its own. Kind of makes sense in a Death and Taxes build overall. Alright, with that being said, that's what happened this past weekend. Pretty crazy. So I feel like now we're getting to the point where a lot of folks are going to be thinking about the next meta. After this week, I don't see a lot of people trying to build decks unless they happen to have a GP coming to their hometown or something like that. I think for the most part, folks are going to be thinking about Guilds of Ravnica and rotation and what's going to happen in the future. So I do expect Standard to start to slow down a little bit, and we'll kind of follow that as we go through the weeks. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.